Hello, LSR7. I'm Katy Bergen, Executive Director of Public Relations, and I'm speaking to you from the beautiful Summit Technology Academy studios on the Missouri Innovation Campus. I'm here with Superintendent Dr. David Buck and three special guests from the district. Dr. Buck, what are we doing today?
Well, I thought it might be a good idea now that we have our board-approved plan to go over what it looks like, not only at different grade levels, but through different models. And let's do it podcast style. I know we're not quite ready for a podcast to be on iTunes yet, so we're doing a little video-wise, but I thought it'd be good to do a podcast style.
Yeah, I feel like one of the first things you and I bonded over was a desire to bring a podcast to LSR7. We're not quite there yet. This is really more of a video, but we are hoping to be there and have a formal launch later this fall. So I figured this would be a good practice run, right?
Yeah, and there's no ferns next to me, so I feel a little comfortable. Not between ferns.
Our podcast will be funny. We can be serious, go in different directions, but we'll start today focusing on the topic that we know is on everyone's mind, which is reopening. We have three people from the district office with us today who are going to really break down some details that we know people want about our reopening plans. To my left is Dr. Patrick Shelton, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education. He's going to help us understand both the virtual elementary experience and the in-person pre-K through third grade experience. We have Dr. Don Andrews, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education. He's going to help us understand the temporary virtual experience of our middle school and high school students, as well as what hybrid learning might look like when those grades move back to in-person learning. And finally, we have Mr. Kyle Pace, Director of Instructional Technology, who can speak to the development and expansion of our R7 Online Academy for our families who chose to participate in our all-online option this semester. So how are you guys doing? Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Doing good.
Thank you, Katy.
Thanks for having us.
So, Dr. Buck, before we move on, though, I feel like we maybe need to do a recap. So how about you start us off by explaining what happened at the Board of Education meeting last night? What did we decide for how our various grade levels are going to start the year?
You bet. So pre-K through 3 will be in person. So pre-K, that is 4 days a week. And kindergarten through third grade is 5 days a week. And then 4 through 12 are going to start the year in a virtual setting.
And talk a little bit about the rationale between why is there a divide in grade levels? And if you were, obviously don't speak for the board, but what was the rationale behind the recommendation to have our youngest students go one direction and our older students go in another?
So when you look at both research-wise, younger kids, currently the research is saying they don't transmit at the high rate, and they don't get as sick. So our adults are safer with them. Plus, if we have pre-K 3 in person, but if we're virtual or hybrid 4 through 12, we can get our class sizes a lot smaller and keep a social distancing piece in place. So I think those were factors, as well as when you look at places that have been successful at implementing going back in school, a lot of the experts point to Europe. They started with the younger kids first and then phased in older kids.
And so we know that our grades 4 through 12 are currently going to start the school year virtual. But talk a little bit about the process we're going to take to evaluate when it would be the right time for those students to come back to in-person learning.
So the original plan adopted in August 6th said we'd make a determination on 25th, but it also said that when we're not in significant community spread, we would be a hybrid model 4 through 12. Right now, we're on the cusp of that when we talk to Jackson County Health Department. Also, the same thing when I shared it to Johns Hopkins, Dr. Josh Sharfstein, if I'm saying his name correctly, said that too. Hey, it's not uncontrolled, but it is still high. It's still significant. So as soon as we're off that significant designation, we're going to be back in person 4 through 12 in a hybrid model.
Gotcha. And what kind of public health data are we looking at? What is the health department looking at to determine that community spread?
So they have 3 factors they're looking at, but I can tell you when we visit with them, they're explaining a lot more factors just in our gating thing. So they're talking about percent positivity. They're talking about number of cases per day, per capita. But with us as well, when they talk to us, they're talking about number of cases teens are getting per capita and how it's changing over time. It's actually starting to flatten off a little bit. They're looking at number of teen cases they get from large gatherings, contact tracing. So they're looking at several pieces of data. As a district, we'll also continue to look at the Department of Health and Senior Services, the state level data, MHS, the hospital data, MARC, which is kind of a regional data that the health department also utilizes. So we'll be looking at data in various ways.
Gotcha. Do you want to start us off and ask some questions with our guests?
You bet. So I know the reason why we wanted to do this is what's it going to look like for a student whether grade, whether elementary or secondary, and if they're in person, hybrid, or an online academy, because we did have 20% of our kids choose an online academy, and kind of go through that. And I'm a parent of 3 kids at the elementary and the high school level, so it's actually very pertinent to me as well. So I want to start off with that and just tell me, guys, just real quick, what's it going to look like?
Sure. So at the elementary level, for students in grades 4, 5, and 6, it's going to look somewhat similar to a school day. They're going to log in instead of go to school. They're going to log in. They'll probably have a check-in with their teacher. They'll probably participate in some type of ongoing instruction that's live or videotaped, depending on the lesson and the content area. They'll have daily instruction, reading, and math. They'll participate in their special classes, art, music, and PE. There are going to be some embedded breaks, just like at school, where we have recess, things like that, a lunch break, and then probably close up their day with a class meeting as well. So their day is going to look very similar to what it would look like during the school day, but there'll be some opportunities for them to go off and work independently as well. And so that's the time that they'd be able to go off and read. They could write. They could work on a project, things like that.
How about you, Dr. Andrews?
Yeah, I think it's very similar at the secondary level in that we'll be able to follow pretty much a schedule when we're in a virtual environment. Everyone being virtual allows us to still have a designated time for first hour math to get on with their math teacher. Some of that will be lessons that are given. Sometimes there'll be an assignment posted, but it still creates that designated time where their math teacher is available that period during math class for them to go through. So again, we'll work through the day. There has to be some flexibility with that. Every student in every home can't be on at a exact set time, especially when you have multiple children in the home, et cetera. So our teachers will have to be flexible. They'll have to do some recordings that they put out for people, but pretty much during a virtual environment, we'll be able to follow a school day through most of the periods. We are really looking at that structure on Monday and Tuesday, and then again on Thursday and Friday. So students will definitely have 4 times to touch base directly with their teacher that's teacher initiated. On Wednesday, we're going to have a little bit of a flexible day with the virtual instruction. Students will still have an opportunity to connect with their teacher, but it also gives more time to reach out for special projects or those in need that they can connect with in a little bit more flexible time with designated, office hours for teachers as they work through.
And that's going to look the same at the elementary level. We're going to have an abbreviated day so that they can, again, check in with kids, because we know that everybody handles virtual instruction differently. And so we want to be able to provide the support that they need.
Dr. Pace, how about you for Online Academy? And can you explain a little bit difference between Online Academy and what we're talking about when we're talking about virtual education?
Yeah, absolutely. So the district's had online courses since 2008. So I can remember back in the day when we first started developing those first set of online courses and having dedicated teachers who took that on as part of their regular course load. They taught it in addition to their regular course load, and we still have that going on, but now we've greatly expanded the amount of online classes that we can offer, particularly at the secondary level. We're able to offer much more. I believe our total is 219 online courses that we're offering now.
Wow.
At the secondary level, in addition to the 47 regular R7 online courses that we would have had anyway. So we have greatly expanded our online offering. And yeah, kind of like what Dr. Andrews said, there's whereas the virtual kids still have their set schedule. The online kids don't have a set schedule. So there has to be much more flexibility there for what their day of learning can look like. Yes, we still want it to be a good balance of synchronous and asynchronous, or real-time and self-paced, if you will. But there's got to be a lot more flexibility of when kids are available to jump into a real-time session versus when they may have to watch a recording later of that real-time session.
So would it be safe to assume that first initial check-in for maybe elementary and secondary would start at a time that's more similar to an in-person school day versus online, where that might be a little bit more, you might have a little more control over when your school day starts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very similar at the elementary level.
I think some of our high school students might be pleased to hear we are trying to give a little grace when you're getting up and getting on a computer and trying to
Excellent.
start first hour more around 8 o'clock as
Okay.
opposed to the 7:30. They'll still have plenty of time to work through their days, but we don't have 5 lunch shifts for virtual side. Everybody can take a lunch break at the same time, so we don't have to build in quite as much time and are looking to start just a little bit later for those that have a difficult time getting up in the morning.
Gotcha. And how much? What do you think the time commitment is in terms of how long will the school day take? Is it going to take the same amount of time?
It's interesting.
Altogether?
That's been an active conversation right now because when we talk about the regular school day, there's a lot built into the regular school day that really doesn't have a lot to do with teaching and learning. It has to do with keeping kids safe. So things like transitions, things like making sure we can hand wash and sanitize has been an active, making sure we can serve lunch to a group of kids while cleaning up between hand. So we look at a regular school day, it's about 7 hours, but really there's probably between 4.5 and 6 hours of instruction that happens. And so an online day will probably look more like that 4.5 to 6 hours, depending on the age of the student.
Yeah. I would just add from the secondary side, I think it creates a little bit more flexibility. We've all been in class. You have an opportunity to work on some of the reinforcement, the practice going on. Some kids get it done really quick. Some may take a little bit longer time to go through. In a virtual environment, as that time is provided to students, there'll be some flexibility for those that get done. They can go on to something else, work on something, and won't have to necessarily stay logged in and live, but the teacher will still be there during that period. So if they get stuck, have problems, have that opportunity to reach right back out to them within their schedule. So the start and the end of their day won't be dramatically different. It just may not be as packed straight through for a high school student or middle school.
And I think it's important too, along with that, that parents have the understanding that no, we're not expecting their child to have their face in their Chromebook screen for those 4 to 6 hours all day, every day. We want it to be a good mix of online and offline learning activities.
So, Dr. Andrews, last March, all districts in the state of Missouri, March 13th, they didn't know, but by March 15th, 16th, 17th, no school was coming back. So we have very little time to plan, and our staff at LSR7 and across the state did an amazing job with very, very little time to plan. But obviously we have a lot more time to plan. Talk to me, what's the planning look like at LSR7 now for September 8th compared to coming back in March?
Yeah, there's really 2 parts to that, and it was a great job that our staff did pushing out learning online. But they had lessons prepared for face-to-face, not for online, and did the best that they could last March, April, and May. This year, we had some forecasts. We had hoped we would be back in person, and when we left, we really thought that we would. Unfortunately, here we are again. But we anticipated the possibility over the summer, and even in the summer, each of our buildings began working with their teachers about opportunities to create and prepare additional online content based on the courses that they thought they would be teaching. So even before we made our announcement, we were working on increasing that content, how to structure lessons to be more effectively delivered online, going through. A positive part along with that, with the adjustment of our calendar to September 8th, we made a commitment to provide additional work time for our staff. The main pushback on that was around making sure we were really prepared for online learning should we have to go into that. So really over the next couple of weeks, our teachers are really going to be focusing full days on online creation of content to really ramp up what we can offer them. It's great that our teachers have the ability to work within departments, so our Algebra 1 teachers can work together, our American government teachers can work together, and they're not all having to create this on the fly as they go through. So the more we share that content, the more quality we think we will have in that, and hope to really be prepared to hit the ground running on September 8th.
So Dr. Pace, obviously we went to 40-something courses to 200-plus additional courses, plus all of elementary and online academy.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about how we got there. What happened over the summer to create that content whereas the elementary level probably is better than any product that's out there for sale.
Yeah.
You guys are humble, though. I want to add that that's a monumental task from what I understand. I had someone take me aside and say, do you realize how big of a deal it is to
think
build
we've
this program from scratch?
Yeah, I think we've talked about that a few times. This is no small feat by any means, and that's the exciting part about it for me. And we were just talking to the elementary group specifically about that. You know, we started this work with our elementary folks specifically on July 15th. That was the first time we convened this group of 35 Lee Summit teachers across all grade levels, all elementary grade levels and specials classes, where they began, you know, they received 2 pretty intense days of professional development about what does good online learning look like? How do we design online learning effectively, knowing full well, while what we did in the spring was awesome, we know it could be better. And so we really focused hard with them on setting that stage, getting them to think as a designer. And so in a month, that group of 35 built out the entire first quarter of online learning for our elementary students. And that's just amazing to think about, because we did look at, do we need to purchase something?
Mm-hmm.
We went down that road, and we didn't find anything that was high enough quality for our students. And so we knew we had our own people. Same with secondary. We knew we had our own people that could create the high quality that we expect and that we want for our kids.
And I think Kyle kind of downplays a little bit of the sacrifice of our teachers, because a week earlier we were having a conversation about, is this the direction we want to go? And a week later we had 35 plus teachers, and we had LMSs and early childhood in a room, really giving up the rest of their summer to dedicate to creating this and doing amazing job. I mean, teachers just left and right talk about the quality of the work that's up in Schoology.
Well, let me ask you this, and I think some people may have this question, or it's confusing because there's a lot of terminology and labeling that we've created over a short period of time, but we know that online content has been developed for our virtual learning, which is really the remote learning that we're delivering as part of that in-person track. And we know that online content is being developed for our 7 Online Academy, our all-online option. Are those two things different? Are they the same? I think people are wondering about whether the curriculum is the same between the two pathways.
So the tracks are different, right?
Correct.
Because when you elect to go online, you're in online learning, and that's how you're going to complete the rest of your semester. But teachers across LSR7 have access to that, to the same resource. So our virtual teachers, whether they are virtual now or whether we at some point end up, in a different model of virtual, they're still going to have access to those same resources and supports that our online academy teachers have.
And I would add the same for secondary too. We've had our traditional R7 online courses for high school that we've offered year after year for a long time, but now we have teachers teaching those courses in an online format that have never taught those courses in an online format before. So that's where at the secondary level, we're going to be relying and leaning heavily on our teachers that were already experienced in teaching some of those courses online, kind of helping and provide, sharing of resources and ideas and things to help those other teachers that are now taking on online sections of the same classes.
So if I can go to make a comparison, so CDC and everyone else agrees with us. We think in-person is preferred. They'll say, except when significant community spread, which is what we're in right now. That's why we're in virtual level for 4 through 12. So with that, the reason why it's better in person, because we do more than just academics in school. So when you're in a virtual setting, or for the 20% of parents who chose online for the entire semester, how are we taking that into account and trying to meet some of those other needs beyond academics?
So one of the, you want me to go?
No, you.
Okay. So I think one of the neat things about online learning is it provides so much more flexibility for the teacher and the student. So students really have the time to get what they need, because when we're in the school day, we have 7 hours to work within. And we have to get everything we need in that 7 hours. And some students might need more and some students might need a little bit less, but we still have them for 7 hours. In an online environment, you have way more time and flexibility. So we can do more frequent social emotional check-ins with students if we need to. We can involve staff in a different way if we need to. We can provide students with a greater level of academic support if we need to because of that flexibility of time.
And related to academic support, do you want to briefly talk a little bit about the exceptions we have for in-person learning for any grade, even if maybe that grade level is virtual right now?
You bet. So we already have several exceptions from the Jackson Health if I can say that correct, Jackson County Health Department. We have several exceptions for them that include students with IEPs. If the IEP team deems it necessary that the kid would be in person to meet their IEP needs. Certain students who are in the ELL population, certain career technical education where safety might be an issue. So if Dr. Andrews is a kid and he's in auto tech, do we want him working on his car in his driveway without parent supervision?
I think some parents will thank you for that.
or do we want to make sure we're in a safe environment while he learns how to use tools safely? So we have those kinds of exceptions. And we also can bring in kids one-on-one in short bursts for tutoring when kids are falling behind. So we have that option. If we notice that little Johnny or so is falling behind academically, we can engage the family, and if it makes sense family and school wise, bring them in for short bursts of tutoring to try to catch up.
Dr. Shelton, I want to make sure that we don't lose track of the fact that we do have several grade levels learning in person, and I know that the subject of this video podcast, call it what you will, is a lot about online because we know that's in familiar territory and where a lot of our questions are. But talk a little bit about how the school day will be different for our young ones who are going to be in the classroom. What's going to be the same about that school day and what might feel a little different as we implement some health and safety protocols.
I think one of the things that's going to immediately be noticed is everybody has a mask on, just like everywhere else, right? So our students will be wearing masks. We are doing staggered arrivals and arrivals at different locations to try to keep students from clustering together. We've also made some changes in certain routines like breakfast pickup. So prior to this year, they had to put in their keypad to pick up breakfast. Now they can just pick it up, and we have a different way to track who's eating breakfast. Obviously, they'll be distanced apart in the classroom. And so students will have their space between each other. And we just actually talked with teachers today about what can we do differently when we talk about things like class meeting or circle time. Well, you go outside for circle time. You could borrow the gym for a few minutes. You could find a larger space in the building that you could use. There's also, our principals have done a great job identifying, when possible, one-way hallways, more sanitizing stations, opportunities for hand washing as part of the regular schedule. And then when students are using equipment, we're identifying that equipment stays with either that classroom or that individual student, and then sanitized before it gets used by a different classroom.
Gotcha. Do you want to talk a little bit about class sizes? Will we be able to keep elementary classrooms a little smaller?
So we are targeting to get classroom for K3 a little lower than what we had. Right now, the average is about 18 across K3, and we're looking to lower that just a little bit before we actually get in person.
Got it.
So Dr. Shelton, if I could follow up on that. So we have about 20 to 22% of our kindergartners going to start our online academy, 78-ish to 80% of our kids are going to be in person. Kindergarten's a unique time, right? You're transitioning for the first time out of the house into school. Tell us what that will look like, both in the online academy world and them. Are we doing anything special for them to welcome them?
Yeah, so for our online academy students, they're going to have a little bit smaller class size because we know they need a little bit more attention as they learn on a Chromebook and learn in that online environment. They'll still have Meet the Teacher and everything else that a kindergarten student would get, except it'll be online. For our students that are coming in person for kindergarten, our buildings are providing a small group setting where they can come in and get their Chromebook, learn how to log into Schoology, bring a parent, see the classroom, meet the teacher, and parents will be able to sign up for a reservation system, so they'll be able to come in groups of around 5 to meet their teacher next week.
And this might be a good segue about transition days and meet your teacher at other grade levels. What's the plan for that?
Yeah, our transition days we are not going to be able to have in person, obviously, with us starting virtual. There will still be a recorded session that goes out for freshman transition coming in. Our Meet the Teacher is a little different at secondary. We have our back to school nights, and those will still happen, but they'll be in a virtual format.
Got it.
And in first through sixth grade, Meet Your Teacher will happen with an introductory video that students will get with some additional information. And then they'll have some times that they can sign up and just log into a Google Meet to meet their teacher.
So obviously the goal is to be in person. So hopefully soon we'll be in person 4 through 6. So it'll be a hybrid model when we do return. So walk us through what's a 4 through 6 and a high school, middle school level look like in a hybrid model.
Yeah, when we talk about hybrid at the secondary level, or I think will be very similar in grades 4 through 6, the main concept is dividing your students into two groups so that we can reduce the load on the building and increase the opportunity for social distancing. That becomes essential at a high school where you may have 1,600 to 2,000 students in a building and just have no way to social distance hallways and lunch, etc., without reducing that load. So under that scenario, on Monday and Tuesday, Group A, or about half of the students, would meet in person with their teacher. Then they would have 2 days of more self-directed online learning still created by that teacher. On Wednesday, the teacher will make connections with all students, or both the A and B group. And then on Thursday and Friday, they in-person will be there for Group B. And, I have to say, our teachers are excited about an opportunity to get to hybrid because of that face-to-face connection. It's just really important. At the same time, hybrid is probably the method that will be most taxing on our teachers. And we need to remember that because they will be teaching face-to-face 4 days a week while still being responsible to provide ongoing content for 2 to 3 days a week for that same group of students. So there's a significant load on our teachers, and we recognize that. We need to support them through that time, but they're excited to have that opportunity to make those personal connections with students, which makes learning so much better.
And it does look very similar at the elementary level in terms of structure and format. 4th through 6th graders need a little bit more support than high school students in terms of self-directed learning. And so we're working to identify some additional adult supports that might be available to do check-ins and things like that.
And Dr. Wright, I know you've talked about this a little bit, but talk a little bit about the timeline and the process we're going to use to determine when we would make that transition back to in-person.
So August 6th plan approved was when we're not significant community spread, we'd move into the hybrid model. The Jackson County Health Department has a gating system right now with 3 metrics they're looking at. And if we have 2 of them lower than red, they would encourage elementary to go back. If we get all of them below red, then they're talking about we would encourage secondary. So we're kind of looking at that kind of situation where we're not in a significant community spread so we can be in person again.
Got it. Let's talk a little bit about schedules and some of those just typical back to school things that we know people are asking a lot about. When will people get teacher assignments and schedules and all that good stuff about with information about starting the school year?
This is the point I would want to give a shout out to our building administrators and especially our counseling departments at the secondary level. They had a enormous task dumped on them in late July, early August. It takes about probably 2 months to build a quality master schedule and schedule 2,000 different students into 7 classes each, or 14,000 different sections within a high school. They rebuilt it in about 10 days by removing 20% of those people out and creating our R7 Online Academy, and then having to reallocate all of those sections going through. So our counselors and administrators have spent countless hours over the past 2 weeks getting that schedule all back in place. I am very pleased to announce that they are getting close, that they're almost there. We've actually talked about that just today, and we're targeting September 1st as our opportunity to make schedules live. We'll be a full week ahead of when students are ready to actually begin, because I know they're excited to see what their class is, what that looks like. So we think we'll have the final touches put on it and be ready to announce it next week.
That's been sort of the mantra of the summer, right?
Right.
It's coming.
Right.
We're almost there. We're getting ready to wrap up this conversation. Is there anything that we should be asking you guys, questions you've fielded again and again that you think our larger audience watching at home might need to know?
I've gotten the question a lot. about our elementary online students, do they need school supplies?
Great one.
And the answer is very much yes. Right now, I've been letting those parents know that their students still needs to have school supplies. Right now, it's just the traditional school supplies, like if they were attending school in person, with the addendum that as the year progresses, there might be times when they need specified supplies for various learning activities. And that will most definitely be communicated to them by the teacher when those instances occur.
I've also gotten a question about flexibility and how much flexibility is there in the day.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to build it to where there's a lot of flexibility. So, as a dad, I know that my child's going to learn best having a face-to-face teacher, but I also work all day. And so that may not always be a possibility where I can make sure that she's logged on. And so, we're going to have recorded opportunities for them to get the content later in the day if they need to, so they won't miss out on that piece.
So checking in with a teacher is very much a possibility. If you miss that opportunity, it's not like there's a penalty or that you can't do that assignment at a later time. Perfect.
I think one of the biggest questions that we're getting in secondary is kind of that difference between an online course at the secondary level versus virtual online. And will those be the same? And as some of them discussed before, the content will be the same. We are going to work from the same curriculum. They're going to share materials back and forth. There will be a little bit more opportunity for the face-to-face synchronous learning in a virtual environment just because they can do the schedule. If, by chance, we would have had the opportunity to hire 50 new teachers and make them all serving our online academy, we could have created a structure with the schedule that way too. But unfortunately, we know that budgets aren't in that kind of position right now as we're working through. And what we ended up having to do at secondary is, as students transitioned from that face-to-face to online, we might not need an additional 2 sections of 9th grade English or of Algebra 1 or of geometry. So we had to take a teacher who normally would teach 6 sections a day and say 2 of those sections, you're going to be our R7 Online Academy teacher, and you're going to keep your other 4 face-to-face, which right now happen to be virtual. So they'll be teaching 6 in a row that are a online format. But what that unfortunately does is we could not build a online student a schedule to where they have a first period, a second period, a third period, because I may be doing math and Kyle may be doing science, and we both may be assigned that off first hour. So the student will have access to us first hour, but we both can't require him to be online in a synchronous format during first hour. So an online is going to have more flexibility for the student to work at their pace, go through and have to post more. But I just really want people to understand the rationale behind why an online full-time student can't necessarily have that very same schedule that a virtual may.
And of course, that flexibility is important throughout, right? Because we know that synchronous learning uses a lot of internet data, and we all come to the table with different data plans. And certainly the pandemic has challenged us all in this way. So again, what I'm hearing is the opportunity is there always to check in with your teacher and to participate in that synchronous learning when it's available. But you still have the opportunity to study and do your work and check in with your lessons at a time that works for you for the most part,
Absolutely.
right?
Katie, I think you hit on a good point too, is that connectivity. So last spring we had 75 to 100 hotspots that we loaned out to people who did not have internet. Because of the pandemic and some economic downturn that has occurred because of that, we have scaled that up, correct? So Dr. Pace, can you talk about what do we have available, and if a family doesn't have internet, but they're in an online or virtual setting to start the year, how can they get help?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach out directly to their school. If they need help getting a hotspot, our technology department has greatly increased the number of hotspots that will be available to families to check out. So that is, we've recognized that is very much a reality for many of our families, and we wanted to provide that for our families that need it.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think we've piloted our first podcast opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the work
Thank
and
you,
everyone's
Katie.
doing.